r/Nosleep. Posted by u/Binapocalypse. I had the most terrifying experiences in college. Part 1. I graduated from high school last year, and like many of my friends, I was so excited to go to college. I had gotten accepted at a school far away from home. I'll leave out the name here for legal reasons, but suffice to say, it was a decent school and would be my first time living away from home for any significant length of time. None of my high school friends were going to the same school as I, so for the first time in my life I was going to be striking out on my own. As you can imagine, I was very excited. My new college was in a beach town, gorgeous weather, new environment, and it seemed like a whole new world of possibilities was opening up for me. I arrived a week early to settle into my new home, a two-man dorm in the cheapest student housing I could find. The room itself was pretty nice. After the horror stories I'd heard about dorm living, having a small kitchenette seemed like the height of luxury, so I didn't mind that there were communal showers and toilets for each floor. Now, a word about the communal bathrooms. They were capital C creepy. There wasn't anything specifically awful about them, no rotting smell or cold spots or obvious poltergeists. It was just a combination of age which had caused the tiles to crack and yellow, overuse and undercleaning which had left some pretty gnarly mildew patches around, and a vague sense of unease whenever one entered the room. It was fine enough when the bathroom was full, as gross as that may seem, but when there were 3 showers going and a toilet flushing, well, how can anyone be creeped out? But if I ever had to go in the middle of the night and no one was around, man, I learned how to hold it. By the end of the week, I had finished settling in and had also taken the time to familiarize myself with the campus, finalize my schedule and start finding the local hangout spots. My assigned roommate never showed up, though, which was a little odd though not unwelcome. I was finally living on my own, but truthfully I had been a little nervous about sleeping in the same space with a total stranger. Looking back on it now, I wish my roommate had shown up after all. Maybe things would have turned out differently. In my pre-term wanderings, I had started getting to know a small group of freshmen who, like me, had arrived early and were nervously excited about striking out on their own. They lived in the same housing that I did and we decided to form a study group. Once the term started, we met up almost daily either in the library or at a local pizza shop that we just called Joe's. There were 5 of us in all: lanky, quiet David, boisterous Alex, beautiful Sarah, tiny, sarcastic Carla, and of course, me. I know those descriptions sound cliché and maybe they are, but are you really going to remember these random people without some descriptions? I'm really doing this for you, dear reader. I liked them all, of course. Not that any of them were particularly close friends of mine, but we all got along fine. Well, sort of. David was a little bit odd. I would sometimes catch him staring at me, when he thought I couldn't see him. I'd catch him out of the corner of my eye and turn, just in time for him to be looking somewhere else. Or I'd catch him in a reflection, just a glimpse, quick enough to be unsure if I was really seeing it. He never seemed to do anything else but stare, so I chalked it up as a crush. Hey, I wasn't bad looking and I still had the ego of youth, or at least extreme shyness. Everything wasn't all perfect, of course. I had a heavy course load and far more homework than I had ever been used to in high school. I had a small group of friendly acquaintances, but no close-knit group of friends like I had been used to all my life. I wasn't hurting for money, but I wasn't rich, either, and I was starting to think about picking up some part-time work, which never went far because I really had no time for it. And really, underlying all of it was a low-grade feeling of fear that soon grew almost into an outright paranoia that plagued me every time I was on campus. It didn't all happen at once, it gradually grew as the days and weeks flew by. It was the same sense of vague unease I got in the communal bathroom at home, almost like someone was watching me, someone who didn't like me very much. As time progressed, I'd get flashes of cold and my vision would start to gray out on the edges, like flashes of movement or blackness just at the edge of what I could see. Concentrating in class got harder and I started having nightmares. One nightmare in particular became a sort of recurring dream, and every time I had it, I woke up with a headache. It went like this. I'd be sitting in a lecture hall, taking notes, when the feeling started up. I'd get cold and my vision would start to gray out and I'd look around, and the lecture hall was empty. I was the only one there. Then the lights would go out and there'd be this noise, like a high-pitched buzzsaw. Panicking, I'd struggle up out of my seat, like moving through molasses, as the noise got louder. Distant screaming started up and the sounds formed a terrifying counterpoint. The noises got louder, closer, louder, closer, as I tried to bolt for the stairs, struggling through the dream thickness of the room. Then I'd trip, fall and bang my head on one of the stairs. Not hard enough to knock myself out, but damn sure hard enough to leave me dazed. Panicked, I'd roll over and look down into the dimness of the hall to see the source of the noise, a man with a medical drill, all in doctor's whites, steadily advancing up the stairs towards me, grinning. I'd struggle to get to my feet as he came closer, closer, and then I'd wake up. What was most disturbing about the dream, though, is that every time I had it, I swear he got a little closer. The first time I dreamed it, he had just started up the stairs, but now, after a few months, he was just a few feet below me. Close enough for me to start making out some details, like the fresh bloodstains on his coat. Like the fact that he was starting to look familiar. I shrugged all of it off, of course. What was I going to do? Go see the school psychiatrist? Sorry, no, I wasn't crazy, just stressed. It was just nerves. I was in a totally new environment, finally being an adult. Of course I was going to have some problems. Which is all nice to tell myself during the day, but after waking up in a cold sweat with a pounding migraine for the 5th night in a row, I googled nightmare cure and decided to start keeping a dream journal. Dream journal, it read, if you are having recurring nightmares, it may help to keep a dream journal. Note down as many details about the nightmare as you can. Find differences between each episode and thoughts that you have about this. Make sure to write it down as soon as you wake up, before you start to forget the details. Well, what the hell? It couldn't hurt, right? I dragged myself through classes the next day, barely able to think. My migraine hadn't gone away and the constant feeling of being watched was making me jittery. It didn't help that Halloween was getting close, so there were faux scary decorations everywhere. Fake spiderwebs are all fine and good, but I was getting sick of walking right into the middle of them and freaking out. I was leaving my last class for the day when I spotted my little study group heading the other way down the hall. I called out, "Hey, guys, wait up." Alex turned and grinned at me. "Oh, so you're alive after all," he yelled down the hall. "Are you coming or what? We haven't seen you in forever." Feeling a little better, I rolled my eyes. Maybe this was what I needed, some company and human interaction. They slowed so I could catch up as I hurried down the hall towards them. I asked, "Where are we going tonight? Library or Joe's?" Carla smirked, "Somewhere new. I know this may blow your mind, but we aren't all about studying all the time. It's Friday, time for Sarah to slut it up." Sarah thwacked Carla on the arm at that, scowling. "What? It's true," protested Carla. "I don't know if I feel up to a party tonight, guys." I hesitated. I haven't really been sleeping. "We're not going to a party," David said quietly. "Carla's just fucking with you. We're going exploring. It's an old campus and we heard about a wing that was shut down. They never renovated it when this place became a college. We want to check it out, see what's there. There's all kinds of urban legends about it." I stared at him. I think that's the most I'd ever heard him say all in one go. He gave a little embarrassed half shrug as we kept walking. "All right," I said, "sounds cool, but I still have all my stuff. Can I drop it off at home first?" "Yeah," said Alex, "no worries. We aren't going there yet, we're waiting for it to get dark first. Seems more seasonally appropriate that way," he laughed. I shivered a little at that. What the hell was I getting myself into? But I didn't want these guys to know how close I was coming to a full-blown meltdown. I had to save face. Plus, you know, there's a little part of me that's always been an adrenaline junkie, a thrill seeker, and I really just thought, why the hell not? How could it possibly get worse? I was a fool. We agreed to meet up in the quad at 9:30 that night and I went home to eat, change and take a short nap. Lord knows I didn't need to fall asleep in the abandoned wing of the college. I dropped my stuff on the floor, feeling the exhaustion of the week in my bones. I'll just lie down for a few minutes, I thought, then I'll make dinner. That was the last time I slept through the night. I woke up the next morning, feeling better rested than I had in weeks. I remember opening my eyes and thinking, shit. I stood them up. They probably think I was tout. I grabbed my old brick phone and checked the texts. Sure enough, there were a handful of missed calls and a couple of texts from Alex and Carla, asking where I was. The last one said, "Okay, guess you're not coming. See you TMRW. We'll bring you a souvenir." Well, at least they weren't mad. I checked the time, 11 a.m. and judged it late enough to give Alex a call. Straight to voicemail. Tried Carla, same. They were out late and let their phones die. Don't freak out, I told myself sternly. But something felt off. Probably just the lingering sense of paranoia, or maybe something from a dream I'd forgotten. I tried to brush it off and got ready for the day. The showers were as creepy as ever and I shivered even with the water turned almost to boiling hot. I hurried as much as I could, skipping the shampoo in favor of getting out of there fast. I tried calling Alex and Carla again as I got dressed but their phones were still off. It was noon by this point and I was seriously starting to worry. What if they got caught? I thought, or what if they got hurt somehow? They lived in the same building as me. Like I said earlier, David and Alex were roommates in a second-floor room, and Carla and Sarah lived together on the third floor, down the hall from me. I checked both rooms, knocked for ages, but no one answered. My worry was beginning to blossom into a full-fledged panic. Calm down, I told myself, there's nothing wrong. They probably went out drinking and got locked up for public indecency or something. But I knew that wasn't right. Maybe Alex and Carla, but David? No. Something had gone wrong. I had to find them. By the time I got onto the campus, I had almost succeeded in calming myself down. Then I saw the police tape, the cop cars, the crowd of people that had gathered around. Logically, there was no way for me to know, but I knew then, they were dead. I didn't know how I knew or even why that would be the conclusion, but I was certain. I was almost right. I made my way over to the police barrier, trying to get a closer look. I had to shove my way through a little knot of people, mostly people I recognized from class. Rubberneckers. I didn't want to know, but I had to know. It's all a mistake, it's all a mistake, the little voice in my head chanted, it's all a mistake. Everyone is fine. Go find out what happened, probably a drunk driver. It's all a mistake. A police officer came up to me as I started to duck my way under the caution tape. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. There's nothing you need to see here, he said, not unkindly. I stared at him. What happened? I managed to get out, afraid to ask. Afraid to know. He frowned at me. I'm not a rubbernecker, I said hurriedly, but my friends, well, they were going to explore part of the campus last night, and now I can't find them, and I'm really worried that something happened to them, and, his gaze sharpened. What's your name, miss? He asked, suddenly. Sam Weisberg. Am I in trouble? I asked. Well, he said slowly, I hope not. You better come with me. I followed him through the now growing crowd, shivering even in my hoodie and jeans. It was a beach town, like I said, so autumn and especially late October was starting to really cool down. I saw him look at me, he noticed my shivering, but thankfully he said nothing and steered me into the admin building. Collins. The cop said, addressing an older man in a suit, she may know something. Miss Weisberg, he turned to me, this is Detective Collins. You tell him what you just told me. The man, Collins, looked at me sharply. I think my friends are in trouble, Mr. Collins, I said quietly. I was supposed to meet them last night to go exploring and I fell asleep instead. Now no one is answering their phones. They were going to explore a closed-off part of the campus and I just have this horrible feeling. What happened? Are they okay? Despite my best efforts, I was about to cry. God, Sam. Don't lose it now. Come on, hold it together, I thought desperately. It didn't help, being on campus, the awful feeling was back. I had an itching on my neck like a pair of eyes was boring its way through but I couldn't look. I needed the cops to trust me. Come on, Sam. You can do it. Collins looked at me for a moment more, almost like he knew what was happening. Then he said, can you tell me the names of your friends? Alex Davis, Carla Moreno, Sarah Sterling and David. Something with an M. Meekum or Markham maybe? We aren't real close, I said quickly. Something in his face, in his posture, crumpled. I'm so sorry, Sam, he said. There's been a terrible accident. The tears that had been damming behind my eyes started to trickle out. I furiously swiped at them. What happened? Collins hesitated. Please, I should have been with them. Please tell me what happened. He sighed. We don't know what happened, not exactly. And I can't give you a whole lot of details. But I can tell you that your friends Alex, Carla and Sarah have passed away. A member of the cleaning staff found their bodies early this morning and alerted the police. I'm so sorry, he said quietly, watching my face, waiting to see how I'd react, I guess. Oh my God, no, I said, no, please. I just saw them, I cried in earnest, then. They hadn't been my lifelong friends and we were never super close, but I had just seen them. We had pizza together 3 days ago. And I would have been with them last night if I hadn't fallen asleep. As much as I hate to admit it and as much as this may make me an awful person, that's really what disturbed me the most. It could have been me. Suddenly, I wanted to go home. Not back to my dorm, but really home. Back to my friends, my parents. Back to being a kid, where shit like this just didn't happen. But that wasn't an option. I was an adult. I took a deep breath. What about David? I asked, breath hitching in my chest. He would have been with them last night, too. Collins and my cop looked at each other, then back at me. There was no one else there, Collins said in a way that was probably meant to be gentle. No DNA, no footprints, nothing. Are you sure David was with them? Sure he didn't skip out on the adventure? I don't know, I muttered miserably. Maybe. He's a weird dude. But he seemed pretty excited about it yesterday. Can you tell us where he lives? Collins asked. Maybe he knows something that can help. I looked at him. There was something I had missed. You said there was an accident, I said slowly, but you're looking for a culprit. What aren't you telling me? Collins shook his head. Ma'am, you really don't want to know. I squared my shoulders and wiped away the last of my tears. I deserve to know. I don't need to see crime scene photos or anything like that, but I want to know the truth. How did my friends die? If I had gone last night, how would I have died? I want to know the truth. He sighed. I'm sorry. But this is an ongoing investigation. Legally I can't give you any more details than I already have. I'll let you know if we have any further questions for you, he said firmly. Oh, and if your friend David turns up, please give me a call. He handed me his business card. My cop gently touched my elbow. All right, miss, let's get you out of here. He steered me towards the exit and I went with him, numbly. It can't be true, it's a mistake, it's a mistake. Even in my haze of shock and barely suppressed terror, I knew it was no mistake. There was something hideously wrong, not just with the deaths of my friends, but with the whole campus. Why else would I be having these feelings? I was never depressed before this, and the explanation of stress was wearing very thin. To make matters worse, the nightmares had come back with a vengeance. And keeping the dream journal was making me notice details I had missed before, the fact that the screaming was coming from figures in the center of the lecture hall, figures strapped to operating tables, the way that the screams had started to sound like my friends, the way that the evil doctor was somehow familiar, someone I knew, I just couldn't place my finger on who. And maybe worst of all, the screaming had started to coalesce into words, help me and Ron and Sam. They were screaming my name. Edit. Hey guys, I guess I shoved my thumb drive in my purse last night so I actually have the next part to post here. My fiancé was right, it is kind of cathartic posting all this. I really shouldn't be posting at work. But what my boss doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Update number 1. I had to do something. By Tuesday, I was a wreck. I couldn't just sit and wait for insanity to arrive, I had to be proactive. So I did the only thing I could think of, research. I decided to be methodical, detached. I do some independent research after class. I don't have my research notes anymore, but the list I made was roughly like this. Alex, Carla, Sarah, who were they? Some other connection? Where's David? Who is he? No DNA at crime scene. What happened? News reports, autopsy reports. Think CSI. My search for some connection between them proved futile. They had come from different cities, no one seemed to have known each other before college and their Facebooks had simply become memorial walls. They didn't even have mutual friends, other than some of the other students that we all knew. David didn't have a Facebook page, at least not that I could find, but I couldn't really remember his last name and I probably just wasn't looking for the right guy. He still hadn't turned up and I was getting more and more worried that something had happened to him, too, something the cops hadn't figured out yet. I didn't have a way to reach him other than class or pounding on his door, and both avenues had proved fruitless since Saturday. On the other hand, maybe he suddenly went out of town for a family emergency or something. It's not like we were really close, there's no reason he would leave me a note or anything, and like I said, we didn't have each other's phone numbers. My search for exactly what happened proved to be slightly more successful. I found a news report in one of the smaller, local journals, which detailed the assumed sequence of events. October 21, 2006, students found dead in Halloween horror homicide. The bodies of 3, redacted, students were found early this morning by Frank Bloomer, a veteran member of the college janitorial staff. I came in early to restock the supply closets and smelled something awful, said Frank, something rotten and metallic. I thought some of the students had set off a stink bomb or something, you know they get real rowdy around this time of year. He went on to describe how he followed the scent to an abandoned wing of the school, one that's been under renovations for years, and stumbled upon a grisly scene. "In all my years at this school, I never saw anything as bad as this," he said, "never. It was like one of those paintings, the splatter ones, all in red, all over the room. There were pieces, well. Those kids were dead long before I got there. It was like the stories. That's all I'll say. I told the rest to the cops. Mr. Bloomer is not a suspect in the case." The police representative declined to comment on the investigation, which is ongoing. I shuddered. They were found in pieces? What the hell? Did they run into a pack of coyotes or a mountain lion? Was there a serial killer on campus? And what the hell did he mean, like the stories? I made a mental note to pick up pepper spray and an extra lock for the door next time I went out. I shook my head and stretched, popping the kinks in my back from having been hunched over my laptop for hours, researching. I heard a quiet noise from my bedroom, a light clatter like something was knocked over, and I looked up, startled. As I shifted, the angle of my laptop screen changed and reflected the room behind me, and as it did, I caught a flash of something awful. It was Alex, but not Alex as I had known him. He was hunched over in extreme pain and clutching what was left of his abdomen with his arm. His other arm was gone, a few bone fragments jutting out. I froze, too afraid to move, too afraid to scream, utterly paralyzed as he lifted his head. There was a row of stitches above one ear and a stream of blackened blood trickling from one eye as he raised his gaze to lock eyes with me in the reflection. The sheer horror of meeting his lifeless gaze broke my paralysis. I screamed and whirled, flinging my laptop at him, ready to run, but there was nothing there. My laptop hit the opposite wall and clattered to the floor as the battery pack flew off and skittered into the kitchenette. Breathing hard, I looked wildly around the apartment. Had I imagined that? It was so vivid, so real. It's just stress, Sam. There's no such thing as ghosts, you're just stressed. You saw the lamp or something and freaked. How can you even be sure of what you saw? You only saw it for a second. I almost believed it. I was afraid for two reasons: either I was losing my mind, or there was no or. There's no such thing as ghosts. I just needed to get out of the door, get some fresh air. It was well after dark and a weeknight, but there's always something happening in a college town, and this one was no different. I'd never been big on parties, but I needed to be around other people. There was a regular bonfire down at the beach, about a mile's walk from the campus, and I pulled on a hoodie and some sneakers to check it out. I knew this was just paranoia talking, just the aftershock of the adrenaline rush, but I was getting that creepy feeling again, like I was being watched. I kept seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, but I'd turn and nothing would be there. I just needed to get some air. I'm not ashamed to tell you, I bolted out the door. As I hit the street, I slowed to a jog and then a walk, stuffed my hands in the pocket of my hoodie and chuckled nervously. Man, I definitely needed to get out of there, I thought to myself. I'm starting to see things. I made my way to the beach and the usual bonfire spot, but I could tell even from a distance that there weren't many people out tonight. The fire was smoldering down to embers and there were a few figures walking along the beach, but for the most part, it was deserted. I figured I'd at least walk down and get some space. I ran into a couple of people I recognized from class, including one guy who told me to be safe. Man, there's some crazy people out there. Oh, I know. He introduced himself as Chris and offered to walk me home, but I told him I'd be fine. He was pretty insistent. It was a little creepy, but I'm sure he meant well. My short walk turned into a longer one as my head refused to clear. The jittery, paranoid feeling had left, but what it left in its place was not much better, a bone-deep exhaustion and too many questions I had no answers for. I lost track of time as I walked along the beach, then back up into the town and wandered through the quiet streets. Why did they have to die? Who could have done this to them? I should have been with them, I was almost with them. And most of all, what happened? I was sick of these questions with no answers. I looked up and found that I had successfully wandered in a giant circle, right back to my front door. My exhaustion hit me again like a ton of bricks, and it was all I could do to climb the stairs back to my third-floor dorm room. I was too tired to even register the paranoia returning and the flickering movement in my peripheral vision. I chalked everything up to lack of sleep and collapsed into bed, still dressed. Almost immediately, I fell asleep and right back into the nightmare. This time I was in a different lecture hall, one I didn't recognize. It felt old and unused, like no one had been there for years. The chair I was sitting in was rusted and warped, and I knew that this was one of the rooms in the abandoned part of the campus. As soon as I realized it, everything froze, like the universe taking a deep breath. And the lights went out. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't see, could only listen as the high-pitched whine of a drill and distant screaming began. "Wake up, Sam. Wake up, this is a dream, wake up," I was screaming in my own head but couldn't make a sound. The hellish counterpoint of the drill and the screams grew louder and I knew he was coming. I had to move. With a huge effort I got up out of the chair and started running, slow motion, fighting to get to the stairs and get out as the sounds are coming closer and closer and I trip, I always fucking trip, and hit my head on the stairs. Oh god, he's almost here, look over and there he is, that fucking grin, that fucking drill, is that Sarah strapped to the table down there? Oh god, he's almost here, wake up Sam, wake up. Gasping for air, covered in sweat, I bolted upright in bed. My head was killing me. I looked at the clock, 3:30. I'd been asleep for a few hours. I rubbed my eyes wearily, taking deep breaths. It was only a dream, I needed to get it together. I could feel the sweat drying on my body and suddenly, more than anything, I just wanted a long, hot shower. Fuck the dream journal, I was never going to write this shit down. I was even willing to brave the creepy communal shower room. Anything would be worth scrubbing the dried sweat away, maybe it would help my headache, too. I changed into a robe, grabbed my towel and shampoo and headed for the door. Maybe I'll detour and take an aspirin first, I thought, my head is about to fucking explode. I kept a little first aid kit on my dresser, next to a vanity mirror. When I went to grab an aspirin, I noticed something weird in the mirror. A bruise was forming on my temple, right where I knocked it on the stairs in my dream. It was weird. I figured I must have knocked my head on the bed frame or something. I swallowed the painkiller and shrugged it off. It was just one of those things, a small weirdness in the ocean of weirdnesses I was currently treading water in. I just needed to shower, get the remnants of the nightmare out of my head and get on with it. As I walked down the hall to the shower room, I started getting that itchy scared feeling on the back of my neck again, but I refused to look behind me. Everything is fine, there's nothing there, I told myself. It's 3 a.m. and you just had a nightmare. Come on Sam, put on your big girl panties and deal with it. The shower room was dark and empty when I got there. A heaviness settled in the pit of my stomach and the muscles along my spine tightened. There's nothing to be scared of. It's just a room, I told myself. I wasn't very convincing. Moving quickly, I flipped on the lights and turned on one of the showers, letting the water heat up. As the first curls of steam started rising, I felt myself start to relax the tiniest bit. I even started humming a little, some pop song that was playing endlessly at the time. I hung up my robe and towel, grabbed the shampoo and pulled the curtain closed as I stepped over the lip of the shower stall and into the spray of hot water. Eyes closed, I tilted my head back and started lathering shampoo into my hair, still humming. That's when I heard it. Scrape. The unmistakable sound of someone quietly opening a door. I immediately went still, stopped humming, practically stopped breathing. My eyes were still closed and my hair was full of shampoo. I was petrified, straining my ears to hear anything else. Seconds ticked by and my heartbeat throbbed in my ears. All I could hear was the sound of the shower and my own shallow breathing. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it's just one of the other residents who woke up and had to take a piss. Just as I was about to relax, just before I brushed it off as my imagination running wild, I heard another sound, one that made my blood run cold. It was a kind of shuffling, dragging noise, like slow footsteps. And it was getting closer. I frantically started scrubbing the shampoo from my hair, as quickly and silently as I could manage. I couldn't take being blind, I had to see what was happening. It felt like an eternity when really it probably only took seconds, but by the time I could see again I was in full-fledged panic mode. I stared at the shower curtain, straining to see any shape or movement through the thin plasticky cloth, but I couldn't tell who was there, if anyone. I steeled my nerves, took a deep breath and very carefully peeked around the edge of the curtain. Nothing. The room was empty. I let out a huge, gusty sigh of relief, turned around to turn off the water and came face to face with Carla. But it wasn't Carla as I had known her. She was clinging to the ceiling like an enormous, bloated spider, with her head hanging down to look me in the eye. Her limbs had been dislocated and were at unnatural angles. Her neck was impossibly long and I could see the vertebrae sticking out where her neck had been cleanly snapped, so hard that the bone burst through the skin. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when her dead eyes focused on me, when she leaned closer, close enough to touch, close enough to kiss, and whispered to me, with breath like the grave, "Run." I'll be honest with you. I blacked out. I woke up in my dorm, curled in the corner of my closet, rocking back and forth. I had left all my things in the shower room and was soaking wet and completely naked. I still had the bruise on my temple which had started aching again and a massive bruise down my left side. I also had skin palms and knees and somehow I'd ripped off a toenail. All that being said, I felt lucky to be alive. I had the most terrifying experiences in college. Part 2. After some time, I don't know how long, I finally calmed down enough to do a little bit of first aid, aka band-aids like crazy, check the lock on my door, locked, thank God, and huddle in bed with my laptop, waiting for the sun to come up. Sleep was absolutely out of the question, at least for the rest of the night. My classes the next day were going to pass in a haze of caffeine. And if you're wondering how I was even considering going to class while all of this was happening, you have obviously never personally experienced student loans. Nothing else notable happened that night. No funny noises, no more encounters. In fact, the rest of the week was relatively mild. That is to say, I didn't run into the shambling corpses of my friends. Everything else was absolutely going to hell. I was jumping at shadows, every movement in my peripheral vision made my heart rate and adrenaline spike. I couldn't sleep more than a few hours a night as the nightmares had intensified and my lack of sleep was starting to kill my coursework. I also noticed someone following me around campus, Chris, the guy I had run into on the beach. We had a class together and I constantly caught him staring at me, frowning. I didn't have the courage to just ask him what his problem was, I wish I had. Campus security was insane, of course, and there was really no nightlife anymore, not that I had ever been a part of it in the first place. I was glad that security increased, of course, but somehow I was still afraid. All the time. Then, a week after the murders, I dozed off in the middle of a lecture and woke up from the nightmare, screaming. My professor pulled me aside after class. "Sam, are you alright?" he asked, frowning. I shifted uncomfortably. "I'm fine. I was friends with Alex and Carla and, well, I haven't been sleeping well since last weekend." I had trouble meeting his eyes as I said that. His frown deepened. "Do you need help? Someone to talk to? Have you seen a counselor about this?" My eyes widened and I shook my head. "No, I'll be fine. It was just a shock but I'm getting over it." I grabbed my notes and started backing out of the classroom. "I think I'll just go home and take a nap, Professor, I'm sure that will help," I called out as I essentially bolted out the door. I turned left as I exited the lecture hall and ran right into someone. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I babbled. Before really registering who it was, I should have been looking. I stopped mid-sentence. "David?" I said, not really believing it was him. "Where the fuck have you been?" Oh God, I was about to start crying again. David didn't look much better than I did. He had dark circles under his eyes, a 5 o'clock shadow and a haunted look in his eyes. "God, I'm so sorry, Sam," he said. "My mom was in a bad car accident up in redacted, and I took off that night to see her in the hospital. I heard about what happened when I saw the notes on their Facebook pages." He looked like he was about to cry and I hugged him on impulse. He wrapped his arms around me for a minute, then visibly struggled to compose himself. "I thought you were dead," I told him quietly. "I don't have your number or your email address or anything, and when they told me that they didn't find any trace of you at the scene, I didn't know what to think. The longer you were gone." I sniffed. "Well, I guess I have a pretty active imagination, anyway." He put an arm around my shoulders comfortingly. "Sam, you look awful." I thwapped his arm and he gave a strange chuckle. "No, you know what I mean, seriously. Have you been sleeping?" I shook my head hesitantly. "Okay, how about we get some food and then I'll take you home so you can rest." I gave him a, somewhat shaky, smile. "Sounds like a plan." He fell into step next to me as we started walking off campus. He glanced behind us a few times and then leaned down. "Sam," he said softly in my ear, "don't freak out. But there's someone following us." Goosebumps erupted down my spine and my heart started beating faster. Trying not to panic, I asked, "What do they look like?" "It's one of the other students. I recognize him from around campus. I think his name is Chris? Maybe 6 feet 1 inch, dark hair, looks furious. Do you know him?" My eyes went wide. "David, he's been watching me, and following me. It's really starting to freak me out." David frowned, throwing another look over his shoulder. His arm went back around my shoulders protectively and he looked at me again with a little grin. "I think someone's got a crush," he sing-songed quietly. As soon as I did that he looked like he was going to kill me. I chuckled weakly, shrugging his arm off. He frowned a little, then said, "I'm sure it's fine, Sam. He's just jealous that you're talking to another guy. We'll ditch him on the way to Joe's and then we'll sit down and unload on each other. Sound good?" I nodded. "Sounds great." We grabbed food from Joe's and sat down to eat on a park bench. It was still light out, there were plenty of people around, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I started to relax. Maybe the professor was right and I just needed to talk to someone. David spoke up, like he'd read my mind. So, he spoke quietly, almost like a confession. "I obviously know what happened, at least what's on the news. And I'll be honest, I'm pretty fucked up about it. That little excursion was my idea." He fell silent and covered his eyes with one hand, breathing deeply. After a moment, he started talking again. "I'm sorry, Sam. I don't mean to unload all this bullshit on you. I can tell you've been having a rough time, too." I reached over and grabbed his hand. "It's okay, David," I said, "we can take turns having breakdowns. You probably won't believe what's been happening with me, anyway, so take as long as you want," I added, a tad bitterly. He looked at me askance. "Sam, I'm so sorry. At least I've been with my family for the past week. You probably don't have any support system here at all. Have you even been sleeping?" He frowned again. "Don't be offended, but, you kind of look like shit." I choked out a laugh. "I definitely feel like shit," I admitted. "I haven't been sleeping well. I've been having nightmares. And there's been some other stuff." I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me." Something in his tone stopped me cold and the protests I could feel forming on my lips died. He was looking at me, utterly serious, and there was fear? Worry? Something in his eyes. He's serious, I thought. I can tell him everything. So I did. I told him about the nightmares, the feeling of being watched, the hallucinations I'd had in my apartment in the shower. I told him how Chris had started following me around. I didn't want to use the word stalking because I knew how much worse it could have been, and how he always seemed to be watching me. I told him I thought I was going crazy, like the stress and sadness and horror was all piling on top of me and I was afraid I was going to be crushed beneath it. I don't know how long I talked, but when I was done, I wiped my eyes on my sleeve and took a deep breath. "So I'm pretty much crazy, right?" I asked shakily, trying to play it all off as one big joke. I looked up at David, something I hadn't dared to do once I started telling him the unbelievable things that had been happening, and what I saw scared me to my core. He'd gone white, like all the blood had been drained from his face. "David?" I asked, "are you okay?" He jerked a little, like someone waking from a dream. "Oh, God, Sam," he whispered, "I don't think you're crazy." "What?" "Sam, you're not crazy, or if you are, you're not the only one. Haven't you heard the stories?" "What stories?" I asked. He looked around, like he was afraid of being overheard. "You can't laugh, okay? This is going to sound just as crazy as what you just told me, but hear me out. There are all kinds of stories about this place. It used to be a mental hospital, didn't you know that? They closed the place down because they lost their funding, renovated it and reopened as a college a few years ago. I mean, you're not going to find that info in the brochures or anything, but I thought it was pretty common knowledge." He looked at me gravely. "You sure you want me to tell you the rest? It gets kind of brutal." I nodded, mouth dry, unable to speak. "Okay. So the story goes like this. State Mental Hospital was founded here in 1937 and housed the worst of the worst, murderers, psychopaths, rapists, schizophrenics, you name it. The place was run by Dr. Benjamin Meekum, a noted psychiatrist and criminal specialist. He was also insane. He used to torture the patients, inventing new cures for their conditions as a way to conduct his sick experiments on them. They were outcast from society and he knew that no one would miss them if they disappeared. He was a young man when he first took over the hospital, in his early 30s, and his reign of terror lasted for over 50 years. They didn't discover what he was doing until the late 80s, when he confessed to his many crimes while on his deathbed. A state investigation was called and they did find evidence of brutality, unnecessary shock treatments, overdrugging, rape, brain surgery. The list goes on and on. But that's not the worst of it. He fancied himself an amateur surgeon, you see, and he thought that some insanities were contained in afflicted body parts. So he removed them. It was not uncommon in those days to walk down the hall and hear him performing a grisly surgery on one of the patients, unanesthetized. He thought that the physical pain would cancel out the mental pain. The guy was insane. It's safe to say that it didn't, And no one knows how many patients died in surgery and how many others killed themselves when they couldn't bear the pain of living without arms, without legs. The investigation went on for years, as government-funded projects tend to do, and was finally concluded in 1995, when they found the remains of several former patients buried on the grounds. The hospital, now run by Dr. Metcham's son, fought to remain open but funding was cut, the remaining patients transferred to other hospitals and the place closed down for good in 1997. But that's not where the story ends. Construction began shortly after the patients were moved out and the staff transferred to other locations. They just wanted to forget about what had happened. The doctor was dead, his son was found to be innocent of any similar crimes and the hospital had shut down, so why dwell in the past? The cops came through first, of course, to find any other evidence, but once they were done they brought in the construction crews. The building needed some work on the structure and a general cleanup and remodel. After all, they didn't want the place to look like an insane asylum. The operating theaters were turned into lecture halls, walls were knocked out in the common areas to make larger classrooms. You get the idea. They even kept the patient housing and turned it into student housing. That's why we get to live there so cheap, I guess. Anyway, the story goes that there was one part of the campus that never got renovated. We know that's true, but the reason why they never renovated it is where you'll think I'm nuts. Just hear me out. See, the part they never renovated, that part is where the doctor used to perform his surgeries. There's some other rooms and offices, of course, but that room, the old operating theater, that's where they say the ghosts of the old patients stay, tied to earth by the horrors they suffered at the hands of that madman. Haven't you ever felt it? That feeling, like someone is watching you? You're not imagining it. I feel it, too. Lots of people feel it. You should look up this place online sometime. People have documented all kinds of creepy shit. There's regular ghosts, one guy who hung himself in the bell tower, a guy who you can hear calling out for help after midnight from the admin building, but that's not the worst part. He paused for a minute and looked at me, gauging my reaction. I swear I'm not making this shit up, okay? I'm going to sound insane but I swear I'm not fucking with you and I'm not crazy. I nodded. At this point, I'll believe anything, I said. There's two options here, either we're both crazy, or there's some serious supernatural shit going on. I don't know which one is worse. Just tell me. He took a deep breath and continued. The worst part is the disappearances. Every year, students go missing. Most of the time, it's easily explained. They were flunking out, they met someone and ran away, they got too into the party scene and dead. But there's too many of them. The administration keeps it all under wraps and it's hard to really prove anything, but every year a few people go missing right around this time of year. There's tons of theories about it but the most prevalent theory is that Dr. Meacham wasn't finished when he died. That he's still here. And when he gets his chance, he takes his next victims. He looked at me. I think that's what happened to Alex, Carla, and Sarah, he continued quietly. They were found in the old operating theater and the way they died fits with the stories of what he used to do to patients. He looked away. I feel like it's my fault, Sam. I brought it up in the first place. I thought these stories were fun and spooky. I thought it would just be some urban exploring. He sounded like he was going to cry. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I rubbed his arm consolingly. It's not your fault, David, I told him, and for the record, that does sound crazy. He started to get up. Okay, well, I'm sorry, Sam. I guess we're both crazy, then, he snarled. I grabbed his arm, laughing in spite of myself. Geez, David, calm down. It was a bad joke, I said. Come on, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, it's just. You gotta laugh or cry, right? I just don't know what to think. Was this place really an insane asylum? He sat back down and nodded soberly. Yeah, you can Google it when you get home. I'm sure there's websites that will corroborate what I'm telling you, too. Just think about it, okay? I mean, I guess we could both be going insane, but the fact remains that our friends, well, they're gone. And we're still here. And now you're seeing their ghosts and dreaming about what sounds like Dr. Meacham. I shook my head. I don't know. I'll look it up when I get home, but I've never believed in ghosts or anything. Would I rather believe that some psycho killer is on campus and I'm having a nervous breakdown? Yeah, maybe. I'll think about it, okay? I stood up. I'm gonna head home. I need to clear my head. He stood up and said, You're right. Sorry, you're probably exhausted. And it's getting dark, I'll walk with you just in case it is a creepy psycho killer. He grinned weakly. Oh, yeah, I said, "You're pretty intimidating, alright." He laughed and flexed his arms. "Hopefully I don't have to pull out my guns." I shoved him playfully, laughing. He wasn't as weird as I first thought, I said to myself. I guess he was just shy. There was still a lingering feeling of wrongness, I guess, as we walked back to the dorms. It didn't help that his words from earlier kept circling in my head. They even kept the patient housing and turned it into student housing. That's why we get to live there so cheap, I guess. Maybe the things I was seeing were real. I shivered and glanced behind me, catching a glimpse of someone following us. "David," I hissed, casually touching his arm. "Someone's following us, I think it's that guy, Chris." He started to turn his head. "No. Don't look. Just act casual," I said with a fake smile, like he was the most interesting person in the world. "Just make sure he doesn't follow me to my room, okay?" David caught on and smiled down at me with a nod. "Yeah, no worries, I'll walk you to your door." I glanced behind me once more, but Chris was gone. I didn't know whether that was good or bad. When he was behind me, at least I knew where he was. True to his word, David did drop me off at my door. He told me he'd be downstairs if I needed anything, and he programmed his number into my phone, told me to call him if I needed anything. Now that I was back at home, I wasn't tired at all. I had to find out if he was telling me the truth. I must have spent hours on Google, reading all the stories about our college. He wasn't lying. The more I read, the more it seemed to me that the conclusion was inevitable. My friends had, it seemed, been murdered by an insane ghost. Not that I was ever going to come forward with that particular theory. I went to bed and slept my customary 3 to 4 hours before waking up screaming. I was afraid to go back to sleep after that. The doctor in my nightmare, who I now knew was Dr. Meekum, had almost reached me and was about to touch my face when I woke up. I needed to solve this, and fast. I spent the rest of the night reading and drinking coffee. As I passed through the kitchenette for the third time, I noticed a business card lying on the tiny counter. I picked it up. It was Detective Collins' card. I had forgotten to call him and tell him David was back in town. One more thing to do in the morning, I thought. Maybe I should tell him about Chris following me around, too. Kill two birds with one stone. Making that decision gave me some peace of mind, and I was able to doze in my room while a DVD played on my, thankfully unbroken, laptop until I was startled awake by the sound of someone frantically pounding on my door. I had the most terrifying experiences in college. Part 3. I froze in place, hardly daring to breathe. The pounding got louder and more frantic, and I could hear a female voice whisper, screaming, "Open the door, please open the fucking door, oh my god," and I am ashamed to tell you that I did nothing. There are all kinds of excuses for it, and probably they are very good, valid excuses. But I should have opened the fucking door. Because the next thing I heard was a scream which was rapidly cut off. And the pounding stopped. I don't know how long it took me to break the fear-induced paralysis, but at a certain point I could suddenly breathe again. My first thought was, holy shit, I think that was a real person, and my second thought was, what the fuck, that was a real person. I bolted over to my peephole and peered out at the hallway. Nothing, just an empty hallway. It was pretty late, around 3 or 4 a.m. So I guess everyone else either slept through whatever it was, still out with friends. I took deep breaths and debated the intelligence of unlocking the door to check the hallway more fully. I couldn't do it. I was too freaked out. I scrambled for my phone and grabbed the card that Detective Collins had given me earlier, punching his number in with shaking hands. "Hello. You've reached the voicemail of Detective Brad Collins. I'm unavailable at this time, but if you leave a message, I will return your call as soon as possible. Beep." I didn't leave a message. What was I going to say? "Hi, sorry to wake you up at 3 a.m. but I just had either a very realistic auditory hallucination, or something very bad happened to someone in my hallway and I'm too scared to open my door to check which one it is. Yeah, no. That's also why I didn't call 911. I didn't need them to come out and decide I had simply gone insane. Instead, I waited in my apartment until daylight, clutching a kitchen knife, just in case. It made me feel better, even if I didn't know what I would do with it if someone showed up. Finally, the sun came up and I felt brave enough to leave my apartment. I opened my door a crack and peered out into the hallway. Nothing. No suspicious stains, no claw marks in the door or walls, not even anything to suggest that something had happened here last night, except a hair clip with a flower on it that had fallen outside my door. And maybe that was from some other student walking to the showers and didn't notice it falling out. Yeah, right. I couldn't bring myself to leave my apartment that day. I felt like a failure, like I really was losing my mind. I even called David to see if he could come upstairs, just so I could have someone else to talk to, someone else to verify the crazy shit I was experiencing and tell me that no, Sam, you're not going insane, and maybe even help me not die if everything I was experiencing was real. Ring. 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 Voicemail. I hung up. He was probably still sleeping, is all. It was like 7 a.m. on a Saturday. I pulled out my books and tried to get through some of my assignments, but I was distracted. Every little noise was enough to make me jump, and by 10:30 I was doing the thing where you fall asleep, catch yourself, fall asleep, catch yourself. It was thoroughly exhausting. I was also starting to flicker in and out of the nightmare. I don't even remember the specifics, I just remember suddenly waking up terrified, over and over. I had this feeling that I had better not fall asleep for real because the doctor was waiting for me. My phone rang, startling the living bejesus out of me. I checked caller ID - it was David. Hello?
Hey Sam,
Sorry I didn't pick up earlier, he said. I was asleep when you called and didn't check my phone till just now. I saw the missed call. What's up? Everything okay? I felt tears threatening. No, I forced out. I actually, need your help. What's wrong? He asked, concerned. Are you hurt? Where are you, Sam? No, I'm fine, it's just, I had the fucking nightmare again, and then someone was screaming outside my door and I don't know if it was real and I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind. I'm afraid to leave my dorm, can you please just come over? I sobbed. Oh my god, Sam. Yeah, of course. I'm on my way up right now. He hung up. A few minutes later, I heard voices outside my door, David and someone else. They were arguing about something but I couldn't tell what, just the cadence and tone of their voices made it obvious that they were disagreeing about something. David tried my doorknob but I had left the door locked, so he called out, Sam, it's me. Open the door. I did, and he quickly came inside. That fucking creep was outside your room, Sam, he told me. The one who was following us yesterday. I started hyperventilating. This can't be happening, this can't be happening, this can't be happening, played over and over in my head like a mantra. David took me by the shoulders and shook me roughly, snapping me out of it. Sam. He barked, get a hold of yourself. It startled me more than anything else. I'd never seen David get physical with anyone. Sorry, he said quickly, you scared me for a minute there. He made a motion as if to hug me but I turned away on the pretext of putting my phone down. So, I said, making an attempt at casual conversation, have any ideas about what we should do all day in my apartment? That came out wrong, I laughed awkwardly. He just looked at me soberly, chewing his lip. He said slowly, I have an idea, but it involves leaving the apartment. It's scary, and very risky, but I think it will end all the insanity. My eyes widened. Tell me, remember how I told you my theory about Dr. Meekum being the killer? I think I was wrong. I think it's one of the students, maybe he's possessed them or maybe they just learned about the history of this place and snapped, but either way. He paused for a long moment, looking at me, probably assessing my reaction to what he'd said so far. He took a breath and plunged forward, Sam, I think Chris has something to do with it. He's been following me, too, and I just ran into him outside your door. He was pretty pissed off when I told him to fuck off. I don't want to freak you out more than you already are, but I think he was waiting for you to come out of your room. I took a shuddering breath. Well, I said slowly, that's a less crazy theory than the last one. His face twisted for a second into an expression that scared me, hate, or rage. He doesn't like being made fun of, I noted. I continued quickly, so what's the risky plan? I'd do anything to make all of this stop, to just go back to normal. He looked me straight in the eye and said, we have to go back to the abandoned wing. Tonight. If what you heard was real, then he just claimed his next victim. And the guy is melodramatic, he's going to want to return to the scene of the crime. He's going to want to thumb his nose at the authorities and flaunt the fact that they haven't caught him yet. I must have looked dumbfounded, because he shrugged and said, Psych major. I wanted to be a criminal profiler when I grew up. His attempt at making me laugh didn't work at all. Go to the abandoned wing? At night? Is he insane? But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, what choice do I have? The cops have hit a dead end and I have no evidence of anything other than the fact that I'm going insane. So I told him, okay. Let's do it. We arranged that he would meet me back at my room at 8 o'clock as he needed to go pick up some things to make our task easier. He said he knew a way to get in that wouldn't be watched by the cops and that he would make sure we wouldn't get caught, at least, not until we caught Chris, at which point no one would give a shit. I pulled out my outfit for the night and settled into wait. Adrenaline kept me awake for the rest of the day and I even managed to get a little bit of studying done. At 8 o'clock sharp, my phone buzzed with a text message. "I'm at your door. Let's go." I took a deep breath, grabbed my pocket knife and opened the door. David was standing outside, a determined look on his face. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice to be steady. "Good," he continued, "follow me and stay quiet. I found a back way in, but if you make any noise we might get caught." He turned and walked away, trusting that I would follow. I hurried to catch up as we left my building and crossed the street towards the school. I lost track of where we were going, exactly, as he led me through the campus, into one unlocked classroom, through a supply closet with, I shit you not, a false backing. Somehow we ended up in a maintenance tunnel under the campus. The stale air sat heavy in my lungs as my heart beat a rapid tattoo against my ribs. This place had not been used in a while. The lights were dim or non-existent and our footsteps echoed weirdly through the dark. I shivered and quickened my steps so I was closer to David. My anxiety was almost overwhelming and I was seeing movement in the corners of my vision. Then I heard it. Scrape. Thud. There isn't a better way to describe the noise, although it's not quite right. It was the sound of someone walking towards us, slowly, inexorably drawing closer. Dragging something. I grabbed David's arm and yanked him down to whispering height. "David," I hissed in his ear, "did you hear that?" He looked at me, wide-eyed and pale. Slowly, he nodded. Scrape. Thud. His eyes darted into the gloom behind us. We'd walked about 50 yards and there was nothing but gloom and flickering lights in the tunnel either way we looked. We had stopped walking and I was straining my eyes looking back the way we came, trying to see where the noise was coming from. I could feel David shaking next to me. Scrape. Thud. "David?" I murmured, "am I imagining things? Or are the lights back there starting to go out?" He grabbed my arm. "You're not imagining things. And we need to go now, Sam." And with a yank that practically dislocated my shoulder, he turned and took off running down the corridor, pulling me along at his side. Our footsteps clattered and echoed on the concrete, filling the hallway with 1,000 imaginary pursuers. We turned a corner and were suddenly face to face with a locked door, forcing us to stop. I leaned over, hands on my knees, gasping for breath. "What? Now?" I wheezed out. David put his hand over my mouth and looked at me with big eyes. He breathed. Still gasping for breath, I listened. Silence. Then I heard it. Scrape. Thud. The lights at the end of the hallway were all out now, only a few left casting their dim glow out into the hallway. I was starting to see something moving at the edge of the shadows. Scrape. Thud. More lights went out. There was only about 60 feet separating us from the darkness and I could clearly see an outline in the dark moving towards us. "Move, Sam. Move," my brain was chanting at me. "Sam, you gotta move, fucking move." I grabbed David's arm and gritted out, "Unlock the fucking door, David." He swallowed hard, nodded and turned to the door, pulling a credit card out of his wallet. He was going to jimmy the fucking lock while something awful crept towards us. "David, you better be good with that thing because I swear to fucking God," I broke off, unable to speak, unable to breathe. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The thing that was stalking us was right at the edge of the shadows now, a single bulb illuminating the space between us. It was Sarah. She had been beautiful when she was alive, drop-dead gorgeous. It made her even harder to face as this thing. One of her legs had been twisted, broken in several places until it was simply so much meat. She had deep wounds on her arms and torso, and her chest was a bloody ruin. One of her eyes had been pulled out and dangled limply on her cheek. She was staring at me intently with her other eye, a look of horror on her face. She took a step closer to me and I backed up, terrified. What the fuck is taking David so long with the fucking door? Oh my God, I'm going to die here. Suddenly, there was a click and David hissed in triumph. "Sam, let's go," he said, turning around to grab me. Her eye flicked from me to him and her face went from horror to rage. The tunnel grew even darker and colder. I know that sounds like a cliché, but I swear to you this is what it felt like. She lifted one ruined arm and pointed at us, and let out an ear-piercing shriek. It felt like the fucking walls were shaking. It was enough to break my fear paralysis and I turned and ran, shoving David through the doorway ahead of me. I felt something snatch at my hoodie as I ran through the door and I dodged, hearing a soft rip as I made it through. Acting purely on instinct, I sidestepped, turned and slammed the door shut. Less than a second later, something slammed into the door, rattling it in its frame. Then, nothing. I backed away from the door, noticing that we were now in a disused stairwell. I made it up a few steps before bumping into someone. I whirled around, heart pounding. It was just David. "Whoa there," he said. "Sam, are you okay?" "Yeah," I croaked out, heart in my throat. "I'm good. Did you fucking see that thing?" "I saw something," he said slowly, "but I'm not sure what." "What do you mean?" I asked harshly. "You didn't see the fucking dead girl who tried to fucking kill us just now?" "Don't get mad at me, Sam," he pleaded. "I was trying to open the door and all I heard was you backing towards me, and as soon as I turned around you grabbed me, shoved me in here and slammed the door. I think I saw something but it was so fast, I just don't know. Plus it was dark as fuck in that hallway." I covered my eyes with one shaking hand. "I'm not fucking crazy," I thought furiously. The fucking door rattled. I took a deep breath. "It's fine," I muttered, "it's over now. Where the hell are we, anyway?" He grinned. "Welcome to the abandoned wing. These are the maintenance access stairs, but once we go through that door up there, we'll be in the main lecture hall. It lets out right at the top of the stairs, so don't trip." I nodded and followed him up the stairs. When we got to the doorway, he paused. "It's gonna be pretty dark in there," he warned, "so let me go first. I've got the flashlight and I'll light the way in front." He opened the door into the lecture hall. As we stepped through, a feeling of intense déjà vu washed over me. I'd been there before. I recognized the place, even in near-perfect darkness. I had dreamed about it. I shut the door behind us as David continued ahead, sweeping his flashlight in front of him as he descended to the center of the lecture hall. I followed him automatically, almost robotically, not wanting to be left alone even by a few feet. I couldn't believe it. How had I managed to dream this room so exactly? The déjà vu wasn't going away, it was getting stronger the longer we stayed in the hall. As we walked down the stairs I slowed, then stopped, staring ahead. Right there, I thought, that's where he always catches me. I caught a flash of movement in the corner of my eye and whirled to face the bank of windows on the left. Was that a face? Or am I imagining things? "Sam?" I jumped, startled, and almost lost my footing. "Yeah, I'm coming," I said hurriedly, not wanting to draw more attention to my mental state. God knows he already thinks I'm insane. I don't need to tell him I'm seeing things again. I started down the stairs again, but something was wrong. It was like the room had gotten darker, colder, quieter. Where did the flashlight go? "David?" I called out, as loudly as I dared. "Hello?" Silence. "This isn't funny, David," I hissed, suddenly furious. "Where the fuck are you?" I started stomping down the stairs, convinced that this was some sick practical joke. Some friend, I thought. Well, fuck him and fuck this, I'm getting the fuck out of here. I strained my eyes through the dark, looking for the door out of the lecture hall. That's when I heard it. The mechanical scream of a medical drill, coming from the pitch black below me. I turned my ass around and started running back up the stairs. This is a dream, this is a dream, this is a dream. I tripped. Right at the same fucking spot I always tripped. But this time something was different. This time, when I fell, the lights came on. The sudden brightness blinded me and I threw my arm up over my eyes to shield them. The back of my head hurt like hell and the room was spinning as I struggled to roll over and see what was coming for me. It was David, coming towards me with an insane look on his face and a bone saw in one hand. He'd left the drill running, but it was a large stationary drill, not something he could carry with him. I struggled to get to my feet, to fucking run, but my head pounded and the room spun. As I shoved myself up on my elbows, I saw the scene behind David and it was all I could do not to vomit. "David," I croaked out, "what did you do?" He just laughed. Every hair on my body stood on end, not because it was some insane cackle, no, he sounded totally normal. "She needed help, Sam," he explained patiently, still advancing towards me. "I fixed it. You need my help, too. Just wait there and I'll fix you. You won't have to be scared anymore." That was enough for me. I rolled onto my side and started army crawling into the row of desks next to me, still unable to stand. I can't let him catch me, I thought, he's fucking insane. "Saw him," he called out, sing-song, "you know I'm going to catch you. Why are you running?" "I just want to help. Stop and let me help you. It'll only hurt for a minute, I promise." Tears were rolling down my face as I dragged myself along the row of desks. Finally I managed to grab one of the chairs and haul myself up to a crouch. I'd managed to get closer to the wall with the exit door on it, but I still had to outrun David to the door and pray that it was unlocked from the inside. If anything went wrong, I was worse than dead. I'd be like the girl in the center of the room, chunks of meat on a gurney. You can do this, I told myself, you have to. Now. I shoved myself up and started running in a sort of limping hobble towards the door. David let out a scream of anger and gave chase, knocking aside years-old, rusted desks/chairs. Run, fucking run, don't look back, you only have to make it to the door, just make it through the fucking door. I could hear him gaining on me as reached the side stairs, almost falling down them in my mad rush to escape. Don't trip, don't trip, don't trip, I could hear him behind me, his harsh breathing and his footsteps chasing me. Don't fucking trip, Sam, come on, the door's right there, it's right fucking there. I slammed into the door at full speed, grabbing for the handle at the same time. For a heart-stopping fraction of a second, it stuck. Then with a shriek of disused metal and years of rust, the handle turned and the door flew open, spilling me out into the hallway. I fell on my side and kicked the door shut as hard as I could. It slammed shut and I heard the latch click just as he ran into the door with a boom and crunch. He screamed, but it sounded muffled. I learned later that he had broken his nose when he ran headlong into the door. I didn't have any time to waste, though. He'd be after me in a second and there was no way I had enough body mass to hold the door shut, so I forced myself to my feet and ran, staggering through the empty hall. I could see the outside exit. I was so close I could read the words on the yellow caution tape. I heard the door slam open in the hallway behind me, but I knew if I turned to look then it would be the last thing I ever saw. I made it to the tape, through the doorway, and someone grabbed me, yanking me roughly to the side with his hand over my mouth and forcing me backwards. He pitched us both to the side into the bushes and hung on tight. I fought like a fucking wildcat. I didn't escape one psycho just to be murdered by a different one. And then I heard what he was furiously whispering in my ear. Sam, it's okay. The cops are here. Ouch, stop it, it's okay. It was Chris. Chris, who had been stalking me. Chris, who offered to walk me home and make sure no weirdos bothered me. Chris, who had been much smarter than I had. I stopped struggling and waited, shaking, for David to emerge. Then I heard it, the best thing I had ever heard in my life. Sir, drop the weapon. Sir, I need you to drop the weapon. Drop the fucking weapon. He slit his own throat and died laughing. There are a lot of pieces that I put together afterwards. My initial recollection of David's last name had been correct. He was the grandnephew of the infamous Dr. Meekum and had become obsessed with following in his footsteps. He had also been on a cocktail of prescription drugs that all had similar side effects: hallucination, intense anger, suicidal tendencies. The list goes on and on. Yes, he was the one who killed my friends, and no, I don't know why he decided that this was the perfect time to start. The knocking I had heard that night on my door was, I assume, David with the fourth victim, the one I had seen in the lecture hall. I later learned that she lived on the same floor that I did, and my assumption is that when he found my door locked, he went and got someone else to play with. When I photos of her, she did have a disturbing similarity to me, at least in terms of looks. He was trying to use her to lure me out. As it turns out, Chris was a good guy. He saw David following me home one day, in a way that I obviously did not know about, and decided to keep an eye on him. When they had that yelling match outside my door and David came in, Chris stayed outside and eavesdropped. That's how he knew to follow us, and that's how he knew to call the cops. Incidentally, it's also his face that I saw outside the window. He apologized for being creepy and I apologized for giving him a bloody nose when he dragged me into the bushes. We're still friends today. As for the ghosts of my friends, I'll never know if they were real or not. I never had hallucinations after leaving that college. I transferred out at the first opportunity and the school was more than happy to help me leave, and never saw any more ghosts. One thing I do know is that both times they had showed up before the tunnel, David had been hiding, lying in wait for me. It came out in the full investigation that the week where he was gone, he had been hiding out in an abandoned dorm room and, whenever he could, he would follow me. It was him that knocked something over in my room right before I saw Alex, and it was him hiding in the shower room when I saw Carla. Whether they were real or not, they saved my life. There's only one thing I still don't understand. To this day, I don't know why David didn't just run at me when I fell. He could have easily caught me then and I would not be here to tell you this story. The only thing that ever made sense is that it was all part of his game, that he really thought he would be helping me by hurting me. That's the most horrifying thought to me, that this was all a game that he had orchestrated. To have someone be so sane and yet so crazy at the same time is terrifying. I never caught the mask slipping until it was far too late.